start off by saying Barakatah Yahweh, Ba'Hashem Yahweh Shai, Ba'Hashem, B'cha Kodash. Welcome to another live lesson. The name of this one is You Christians Won't Get It. And the title should summarize everything, that's to be said in this lesson. Because, just dealing with YouTube, we've been on YouTube for the last 14, almost 15 years or something along those lines. And it's the same old rhetoric coming from these plantation Christians. It's the same old story, the same old thing. They bring up the Gentile issue. We deal with the Gentile issue. We break it down, explain to them what it means. Go to the scriptures and break it down and show them evidence. Go into the history. Show them all of this information. And yet still in all, they won't get it. They either refuse to get it, or more than likely they're just blinded and can't get it, and that's the bottom line. And we're not really concerned with you Edomites like Vocab Malone, any of those individuals. We're more so dealing with the Israelites, or so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native American Indians out there that's caught up in the web of Christianity, plantation Christianity at that. And this is who the message is really for, because whether you accept it, believe it, receive it or not, you either if you receive it, you'll be delivered if you're part of the elect. If you don't, you'll be destroyed. And that's just the bottom line. Now, the inspiration for this video came through a video I was watching that Elder Ratzaba of the Baltimore camp did, where this woman, so-called apologetist woman, for Christian, whatever, apologetics, or however you say that terminology, apologists or whatever may be, she came up questioning a group of individuals from the Sakari camp, and she was asking about the Jew and the Gentile question, which they always bring up. And one of the first questions she asked, from what the elder caught on camera for the intro of his video, was when Israelites scattered, they were still identified as Israelites. And in some cases, yes, because you had the Assyrian captivity, you had the Egyptian captivity, you had the Babylonian captivity, you had the Medo-Persian captivity, you had the Greek captivity, you had the Roman captivity, you had the different nations that had us in captivity for a certain amount of years, like Moab, the Ammonites, so on and so forth. And yes, we knew we were Israelites in those captivities, but there came a point where we were scattered so far away that we ended up forgetting our nationality. And in some instances, it was beat out of us. All right? When you go into slavery, when they asked that one Jake, what's your name? He said, Kunta Kinte. And they beat him and said, nope, your name is Toby. So what did they do? They changed his name from the name that he knew to a name that the slave master gave him. And at first he would not accept it, so they had to beat it out of him. I just finished watching early this morning, which the brother Rapah from the New York camp sent me a video, which I've been watching certain videos or not really watching. I just saw the the titles, the thumbnail of these different remains that have been found, you know, in these different schools that Esau set up to re-educate Gad. And they went through some horrific shit in them camps, you know. You are only black Israelites out there. You claim that only blacks are Israelites. Man, you're out of your mind. You are out of your mind, because you have, you know, our brothers, the so-called North American Indians, the Gadites, that went through hell. Land stolen, they got everything taken from them, and then they, on top of that, they were put on reservation camps, and from reservation camps, the children were put into these different schools where they were being re-educated. They cut their hair, you know, they changed their names, you know, they couldn't speak their language, and if they spoke their language, they would get beat with straps, you know, to where it brought a whole generation of those that forgot and were made to forget their heritage. At one point, they released one boy from that program, and when he went among the other Gadites, he didn't fit in, because his whole way of thinking, you know, the language that he spoke, the mindset that he had, the deep indoctrination would not allow him to assimilate into his own heritage. So he ended up going back to that school. So this is a systematic, generational mind fuck, for lack of better words. You know, and the name of the video, if you want to watch it, is called Stolen Children, Residential School Survivors Speak Out. So throughout Canada, you have these different schools that there's remains of these children being found, because they beat them, torture them. Sometimes they'll come and pick certain ones of them up, and the other kids will never see them again, you know. And they said that the ones that got beat the most were the boys, because they were the most rebellious, because they're boys, you know. The girls, they kind of fell in line a little bit easier, but the boys are the ones that they had the problems with, you know. So that right there, you know, just those two examples show you, you know, that it's very easy to forget your heritage, your language, your land, you know, if it's not told to you. And this is why the Lord said, when you get into the land and you get children, make sure you teach your children about the laws, statutes, and commandments. Teach them how, you know, the Lord brought us out of the land of Egypt, and with great miracles and great wonders and great signs, and the reason why we keep the Passover, you know, and passing down, you know, the traditions that they would not know, because it's written, but sometimes Jake forgets. So I want to start off here in the book of Deuteronomy, the 4th chapter. Just bear with me. It's a little windy out here, but it, you know, it's kind of it's a nice day. It's a little warm, but it's not too bad in the shade. Salakia. All right. So it says here. This is the book of Salakia. I got a couple of scriptures. So that's why she said, why when Israelites scattered, they were still identified as Israelites. Yeah, to a certain degree, yes. And this is why the Lord said this. Let's go to Deuteronomy 4 and 5. We're going to read a couple of verses there. This is Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 5. It says, behold, I have taught you statutes and judgments, even as the Lord my power commanded me, that you should do so in the land whither you go to possess it. Keep therefore and do them, for this is your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of the nations, which shall hear all these statutes and say, surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people. For what nation is there so great, who hath the Most High so nigh unto them, as the Lord our power is in all things that we call upon him for. And what nation is there so great that hath statutes and judgments so righteous as all this law which I set before you this day? Now this is the point, verse 9. Only take heed to thyself and keep thy soul diligently, lest thou forget, see, the things which thine eyes have seen, and lest they depart from thy heart all the days of thy life, but teach them thy sons and thy sons' sons. Yeah, because eventually, if you don't teach it, what's going to happen is it's going to be forgotten. And it only takes one generation to do that, because those, those children that they were re-educating, among Gad, they could have just, when they had families, their children would have been brought up the same way they were brought up, made to forget their language, so on and so forth. And eventually, before you know it, they have no clue of who they are. So it's very easy to forget who you are. So in most of the captivities we went to, yes, we did know we were Israelites. All the ones that I mentioned, we knew that we were Israelites all the way up to the Roman Empire and beyond. But there came a point where it slowly but surely started to go away. And even back then, you had situations, where Israelites could not call themselves Israelites. You had situations where you had Israelites that knew that they were Israelites, but they cared not for their nationality, because they wanted to be like Esau. In the case of, Tiberius Julius Alexander, who was a general in the Roman military who wanted no parts of his so-called heritage his heritage of being a Jew or an Israelite. And that's why he called himself Tiberius Julius Alexander. He didn't have an Israelite name. And you had something called Sons of Israel in Caesar's service. And the Sons of Israel in Caesar's service, you have a lot of Israelites that were in the military that were Jews, Israelites, but a lot of them had Greek and Latin names. And this is why it is hard to identify who is who, because the ones that were Orthodox Israelites that were writing about these things did not recognize those that did not have a Hebrew name, who did not speak the Hebrew language, who did not keep the Hebrew Israelite customs. And that was the point. And this is what happened. So you have in the book of Ephesians, which they try to use that to say that that's the middle wall of partition between the Israelites and the other nations, the Gentiles. But that's not what this is. This is the middle wall of partition to break down, the differences between the tribes, because there were breaches that were set up. Matter of fact, before we read this, let's go to Amos. Let's go to Amos, the 9th chapter. And this is why it's important to understand the history, And, for the most part, them brothers, they was on it. They dealt with it. They was bringing it to her. They were breaking it down correct, but she just wasn't trying to hear it. And that's what happens when you get a woman involved, See, in the case of Vocab, he's a man, but he's that deaf adder that stopped at the ear. He ain't trying to hear a reason. All he wants to do is push his bullshit and find something to blame us with carnally. But as far as, the reasoning, because if he was a reasonable individual, he would have been like, you know what? I know I teach what I teach, but what these guys are teaching, I don't know. They're very convincing. So instead, what he do, he'll look for ways to flip things, And those that are unsuspecting are going to get caught up in it. So this is Amos chapter 9, verse 11. It says, in that day will I raise up the tabernacle of David. What is a tabernacle? Tabernacle of David? The house of David. The men, women, children that were with King David back when King David was in rulership. It says that is fallen. Why? Because the nation was split in two after King Solomon during the two major kings, which was Rehoboam, the king of the south, or Rehoboam, the southern kingdom king of Judah, and then you had Rehoboam. I'm sorry, Rehoboam was a king of the southern kingdom, and Jeroboam was a king of the northern kingdom. So from that point on, there was a split, a separation. So no longer was the nation of Israel together as one. And this is what happened. This is what separated us. This is what brought that disdain for the tribes. And that's why the Israelites that were of the southern kingdom did not associate with the majority of the Israelites of the northern kingdom. And that's why Peter said that to Cornelius and them. You know that it is an unlawful thing for a man which is a Jew to come and keep company with one of another tribe, because there was that utter disdain, that utter hatred, that utter, you forsook this, so you're no longer a part of this. And when we finish reading this, we're going to get we're going to get Ephesians. So it says, in that day will I raise up the tabernacles of David that is fallen, and close up the breaches thereof. And what are the breaches? The breaches are the differences between the tribes. And that's what the Lord is doing. But you have those that are still keeping that alive on both sides, the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. They're keeping that breach alive, and that's why the Most High is going to move them right out of the way. Because the Lord is bringing the 12 tribes together, not just 3 tribes. All right? Or not just the 9 tribes, which was 10 at one time. You know? It says, thereof, and I will raise up his ruins, because we were ruined, we were destroyed for lack of knowledge. And I will build it, meaning the Lord is edifying it as in the days of old, because the Lord is bringing back those same peoples of the different tribes that were united with King David. You see? So, let's go from there. Let's go to the book of Ephesians, the 2nd chapter, in the 11th verse, and it says, wherefore, remember that ye being in time past Gentiles in the flesh. Why were they in time past Gentiles in the flesh? Because, let's go real quick to the book of 1 Corinthians, the 12th chapter. And we're just going to go straight to the point, the 2nd verse. It says, you know that you were Gentiles, carried away unto these dumb idols, even as you were led. So what happened? You started worshiping them idols, you became unclean, you became defiled, and you fell away. You became like the Gentiles. You took on their customs, you took on their identity, you took on their language, you took on their name. And that's why during the Greek Empire, which that's a very key point in this, because during that time, you had those Israelites that wanted no parts of Israel. And they did not call themselves Israelites. They did not call themselves Jews. They called themselves Greeks. This is why you have something in the scriptures that the Apostle Paul said, there is no difference between the Jew and the Greek. Why is that? Because they're both Israelites. The only difference is that they're speaking different languages. And then one of them was following the ways of the Greeks. But as far as nationality-wise, they are the same people. You see? So let's go back to Ephesians chapter 2 and 11. It says, wherefore remember that you being in time past Gentiles in the flesh, who are called uncircumcision, heathen, uncircumcised, so on and so forth, by that which is called the circumcision, which is who? Which were the Jews in Jerusalem, in the flesh made by hands. So pretty much they were not trying to hear what you were saying. They didn't want you to be a part of this anymore because they considered you to be heathens. That's why they had a disdain for those Israelites that would be accused of breaking the law, and then they would flee to Samaria, you know, for refuge. They called them apostate Jews, you know. So there's a history of a lot of Israelites that were in the land of Samaria at that time because they were fleeing from the Israelites in Israel that were trying to bring him to justice, so to speak, because of they were accused of breaking the law. That's why they called Yahushua. Said, have we not said, well, that you are a devil and that you are a Samaritan and thou hast a devil? Why did they call Yahushua a Samaritan? Because you had Israelites that fled into Samaria that were following the customs of the different nations that were in that land, that were brought there by King Shalmaneser V, the Assyrian king, during the time of Hosea, the king of Israel. You see? So they didn't want no parts of that. And this is why Yahushua said, don't go into any city, the Samaritans, don't go into that city, because you had heathens there, but you also had Israelites there, but the Israelites were following the customs of those heathens. So when he did meet up with the woman at the well, the only reason why he went to speak is because the man of that woman at the time and some other of those people there were Israelites. That's why he wanted to go speak to them, because the word first went to who? It went first to the Jews in Jerusalem. Then the ones that were lost, they would get it later. You know, as the brothers brought out in the book of Romans, the Romans 11 chapter is a key chapter to break that down. That until the time of the Gentiles be come in, you know, because you had a certain number among the Israelite foreigners that had to be brought back to the fold. All right. So before we read any more in Ephesians, let's go real quick to you know what, I'm gonna save that for a little later. Let's go to Jeremiah 2, because that's a key chapter also in the Israelite foreigner topic. So this is Jeremiah chapter 2 and verse, I'm going to start at the 19th verse. And it says, thine own wickedness shall correct thee, and thy backsliding shall reprove thee. Know therefore and see that it is an evil thing and bitter that thou hast forsaken the Lord thy power, and that my fear is not in thee, saith the Lord power of hosts. Because the Lord warned us, he said, make sure that when you go to this land that I give you, that you don't do after the customs and the manners of the heathen that are there, because for this reason is that the reason why they're being kicked out. Because if you do that, you're going to be plucked out of that land too. And what happened? We did the exact thing that the Lord said don't do. So we ended up what? Being casted out. You know? Now some Israelites kept the custom because a lot of those nations allowed it. You know, because the Lord allowed it. But there were certain individuals, because not every king among the Greeks forbade us to keep our customs, our laws, you know, our language, our heritage, you know. But what happened was you had Antiochus Epiphanes, which was one of the main ones that forced Hellenization upon us. And this is why you had those Israelites that were calling themselves Greeks, because there's more nations than just Jews and Greeks. Why did they mention Jews and Greeks, especially at that time? Because the history of the Greek Empire was still fresh, because you had the Roman Empire, who was in power at the time, and they had just recently absolved the Greek Empire into themselves. So they were, should I say, absorbed the Greek Empire into them, you know? So that's why certain so-called scholars call it the Greco-Roman Empire, you know, because you had Greeks that were brought into the Roman ways, so to speak. But the Romans got a lot of their stuff from the Greeks too. All right, so let's read on. This is verse 20, Jeremiah 2:20. For of old time I have broken thy yoke and burst thy bands, and thou saidest, I will not transgress. when upon every high hill and under every green tree that wanderers playing the harlot. And this is the main thing that the Lord got mad about. He was upset about the fact that the Israelites, having the true and living power that we have, Yahweh, by Hashem Yahushai, turned to these idols that are nothing, to worship them instead of the one that gave us everything. And Jake was taking all of the goodies that the Lord gave to us and sacrificing it to those idols as if they were the ones that gave it to us. You see? And this is why the Lord got mad. He got so irate because he said he's a jealous power. And this is why we got kicked out of that land. This is why what happened to us happened to us. This is why we find ourselves in the condition that we're in all the way unto this very day. Because of that very thing, which was the worshiping of idols. It says, yet I had planted thee a noble vine, wholly a right seed. The whole nation he planted correctly. He gave us the correct instructions, but we forsook it. How then art thou turned into the degenerate plant of a strange vine unto thee, unto me? Meaning, how have you turned as these heathens that I told you not to follow after? And this is what them wacky-tacky Christians refuse to see. They refuse to see and accept that, you know, the Israelites, you know, are the Gentiles in the New Testament are referring to Israelite foreigners. And I forgot to jump to the 10th verse. Let me jump up to the 10th and 11th verse. It says, for pass over the isles of Kittim and see and send unto Kedar, and consider diligently and see if there be such a thing. Hath a nation changed their gods, meaning the other nations, which are yet no gods? They're no gods, but did they change them? The answer to that is no. But my people have changed their glory to that which doth not profit. See, for these graven images. So now let's go from there to the book of Psalms 106. And you know, at the end of the day, we do these lessons for edification purpose. And you're gonna have the yay sayers, you're gonna have the naysayers. We have mostly naysayers, but that's all right. If you can't see it, you can't accept it, then hey, let's move on. What do you want us to tell you? There's not much we could do for you. You know, we're here just to, you know, tread out the corn. We're out here to throw the bait out there. We're out here to plant the seed, water the seed. But at the end of the day, the Most High has to give the balance and the increase. Otherwise, you're not going to benefit from it. Salake. All right. So, Psalms 106 and 34. They did not destroy the nations concerning whom the Lord commanded them. That goes back to the land of Canaan. The Lord, we were supposed to totally wipe them out. Men, women, children, supposed to totally wipe them out. But Jake didn't do that. They allowed them to be around. So what happens? You're going to learn of their customs. So it says, but were mingled among the heathen, just like we're mingled among the heathen today, and learned their works. So what do you think happened when we learned their works? We became unclean. Let's go to Hosea. Hosea chapter 8, verse 8. You know, and this is why they call it Hebrew hopscotch, but this is the same thing they do to teach their madness, but the difference is that we're teaching it correctly. Hosea 8:8. Israel is swallowed up. Now shall they be among the Gentiles, the actual real Gentiles, heathens, as a vessel wherein is no pleasure. Why? Because we corrupted that holy right seed, that noble vine that the Lord planted. Now I just want to see something here. Just look up the word swallowed up here. Hosea 8:8. Just bear with me 1 second. Hosea chapter 8 and verse 8. We're looking up the word swallowed up. It's one word, and it's the word galai. I'm sorry, balai, balai. To swallow down, swallow up, engulf, eat up. Yes, because when we went among them, we were eaten up. Swallowed up by what? By their customs, by their religious beliefs, by their idols, by their language. And what happened? That became a part of us. That's why you had Adam and Eve, right? Who did what? They sewed aprons among to themselves. So what did that mean? They assimilated, and they tried to disguise themselves like the nations. Like when you see Jake out here wearing dashikis, you know, and wearing these Muslim garbs and things of that nature, what they're doing is they're sewing them fig leaves together, you know, putting on the identity of these nations. And that's pretty much what happened with Jake, because, you know, when Jake gets into something, they get into it. You know, when Jake becomes a Buddhist, he becomes a super Buddhist. You know, Elder Pastor used to speak about this years ago. When you have a Jake that was born down south, then he becomes a Muslim, and he speaks perfect Arabic, and he speaks English with an Arabic accent. Never been to Arabia, you know. But when Jake gets into it, they become super whatever it is, you know. Whether it's super mo or super ho. Oh man, Salakia. All right, so let's go back to Psalms 106 and 35. But were mingled among the heathen and learned their works. It says, and they served their idols, which were what? A snare unto them. What's a snare? A snare is a trap. And that became the trap. That's why the Apostle Paul said that. Let's go back to it again. 1 Corinthians, the 12th chapter. 1 Corinthians 12. And we're going to go right to the point. Verse 2. All right, Satan. It says, you know that you were Gentiles, carried away unto these dumb idols, even as you were led. And this is why the Lord said that Israel shall be swallowed up. They shall be among the Gentiles as a vessel wherein is no pleasure. Because you're going to be identified as another nation. That's why the Jews in Israel, the circumcision, called them uncircumcised, unclean, heathens, Gentiles, strangers. But they had to be brought back to the fold, because ultimately all of Israel is going to be saved anyway. You see? All right, so let's go back to Psalms 106 and 37. Yea, they sacrifice their sons and their daughters unto devils, and shed innocent blood, even the blood of their sons and of their daughters, whom they sacrificed unto the idols of Canaan, and the land was polluted with blood. Thus were they what? Defiled, meaning unclean, with their own works, and went a-whoring with their own inventions. Therefore was the wrath of the Lord kindled against his people, insomuch that he abhorred, or he avoided, his own inheritance. Because the Lord said, he caused us to be put away from his face. So he kicked us out of that land. It says, and he gave them into the hand of the heathen, and they that hated them ruled over them. Their enemies also oppressed them, and they were brought into subjection under their hand. Many times did he deliver them, but they provoked him with their counsel, and were brought low for their iniquity. Nevertheless, he regarded their affliction when he heard their cry. And he remembered for them his covenant. That's why it says the Lord will have mercy on Jacob and will yet choose Israel. And repented according to the multitude of his mercies. He made them also to be pitied of all those that carried them captives. Save us, O Lord, our power, and gather us from among the heathen, to give thanks unto thy holy name, and to triumph in thy praise. Blessed be the Lord, power of Israel, from everlasting to everlasting. And let all people say, so be true. Praise ye the Lord. Why? Because the Lord is going to once again magnify and deliver us from among these heathen. But the first act of it is what? To bring us back to our heritage. You know, I mean, our heritage is a representation of our land. That's the ultimate inheritance. You know, but you also have customs, traditions, laws, statutes, commandments. You know, that's all a part of the language. That's all a part of the heritage. But the main inheritance is the land. All right. So now let's go from there to the book of Romans, the 2nd chapter. You know, I like going to this chapter when it comes time to deal with the Israelite foreigner issue, because it makes a very good point right here. Romans 2:25, it says, for circumcision verily profiteth. Why is that? Let's go to the 3rd chapter in the 1st verse. What advantage then hath the Jew? Or what profit is there of circumcision? Much every way, chiefly because that unto them were committed the oracles of the Most High. So the oracles of the Most High were committed to the Israelites. And there is a profit in it. But there's only a profit in it if we keep the law perfectly. Which we cannot keep the law perfectly. How can you keep the law perfectly in an imperfect body? In an imperfect world? See? It's impossible. So we do the best that we can. We rehearse the righteous acts, meaning we recount them back. We tell them the history. When we read it, when we're reading it, we're rehearsing it. When we're breaking it down, we're rehearsing it. But also in our doings, we're also rehearsing it. All right? So let's go back. It says Romans 2:25, for circumcision verily profiteth if thou keep the law. But if thou be a breaker of the law, thy circumcision is made uncircumcision. So you go from being circumcision to becoming a heathen. So whenever you break the law, your circumcision becomes uncircumcised. And this is what the Jews, the Israelites, were saying about the Israelite foreigners, that they're the uncircumcised. They're no longer a part of this because they broke the law. This is why the parable of the prodigal son, the son that stayed with his father, was so upset. Because he said, man, this guy went and wasted his living with harlots. He did this, he did that, the other. You making a feast for him? You killing the fatted calf? You never killed the fatted calf for me. You know? And they were so upset. But he said, son, you were always with me. See, this your brother. He went away. Now he's come back. So pretty much what it is it's a redemption. You know, it's a reconciliation. And that's what the ministry of reconciliation is all about. Reconciliation means to restore back to the favor of someone. You can never be restored back to the favor of someone if you never had that favor to begin with. And the ultimate kryptonite of these Christians is Psalms 147, 19 and 20. The Lord only gave his law, statutes, and commandments to Israel. He did not give it to any other nation. So how can these nations be restored back to something they were never a part of? And this is what they refuse to accept. Because that plantation Christianity has been so ingrained in the minds of these people, especially Esau, you know, and that poison from the philosophy of the white supremacy style of Christianity has poisoned the spiritual mind of these devils, and has infected of you Israelites out there, a lot of you. Think about it. Now listen to this. Let's read that again. For circumcision verily profiteth if thou keep the law. But if thou be a breaker of the law, thy circumcision what? Is made uncircumcision. So your mind becomes uncircumcised. You know? You start to fall away. You start to degenerate. As the Lord said, we became a plant of a strange vine unto him. It says, therefore, if the uncircumcision, the ones, the Israelite foreigners, keep the righteousness of the law, start coming back to their heritage, back to their language, back to their customs, back to their laws, statutes, commandments, back to trying to do the right thing in the sight of the Lord, shall not his uncircumcision be counted for circumcision? He's going to come back to his identity. The Lord is going to take away that veil off of them and bring them back into the fold. And that's what the whole Gentile gospel to the gospel to the Gentiles being the favor being restored or bestowed once again upon those that fell away, those that were the uncircumcised, because of our deeds, our actions, because of the worshiping of the idols that we did, that we committed. Now the Lord brought us back. He cleaned us up. We became circumcised once again. Let's go to the book of Deuteronomy real quick. Let's go to the 10th chapter. And let's go to the 16th verse. It says, circumcise therefore the foreskin of your heart and be no more stiff-necked. See? So that the Lord can have favor and bestow favor upon us, because we fell out of favor with the Heavenly Father. Now let's go to the one in the Apocrypha. We're going to get two of them in the Apocrypha. We're going to get 1 Maccabees, the 1st chapter. And you can go on for days with this, because there's so many scriptures that you can hit, so many points to make, so little time to do it. This is 1 Maccabees, the 1st chapter, and the 11th verse. In those days went there out of Israel wicked men, who persuaded many, saying, let us go and make a covenant with the heathen that are round about us, for since we departed from them, we have had much sorrow. So what happened? That once they started to do the things of these heathens, their circumcision became uncircumcision. And they even went as far as sewing the foreskin back on their penis that had been circumcised at birth, at 8 days, so they became as heathens, started wearing the clothing of the heathens, learning their language, their customs, eating their diet, so on and so forth, bowing down to their gods, learning the religious ways of their gods. It says, so this device pleased them well. Then certain of the people were so forward herein that they went to the king, who gave them license to do after the ordinances of the heathen, whereupon they built a place of exercise at Jerusalem according to the customs of the heathens. And that's not our custom. Going to the gym, working out half butt naked, that's not our custom. That's a custom of the heathens. It says, and made themselves uncircumcised, and forsook the holy covenant, and joined themselves to the heathen, and were sold to do mischief. So this is why the Israelites in Israel were calling these individuals heathens, uncircumcised. Man, we don't recognize y'all anymore. That's why they wanted to kill the Apostle Paul, because they said, man, this guy bringing these goddamn uncircumcised heathens into the temple. They were Israelites though, but they were just in that state. They were in a transition period. That's why you had individuals that were following the Apostle Paul, that were listening to him. He went to Mars Hill. You had, I believe her name was Damaris, and then you had another individual I forgot his name. They call him the Areopagite. And then he forsook, those Greek customs to come and follow Yahushua. So he was in the process of being cleaned up. No longer is he called uncircumcised or a Gentile or a heathen like they were calling him before. He's coming back to his heritage of being an Israelite, but he had to go through a cleaning process. And the cleaning process came by way of the word. So now we jump down to the 41st verse. Moreover, King Antiochus wrote to his whole kingdom that all should be one people, and everyone should leave his laws. So all the heathen agreed according to the commandment of the king. Yea, many also of the Israelites consented to his religion, and sacrificed unto idols, and profaned the Sabbaths. All right. So what happened? And eventually, those women that were circumcising their sons, and those men that were keeping the Sabbath, they were being put to death for doing so. So it was a law that he wrote in the form of letters that he sent to his whole realm, where he lived, that everybody's supposed to leave the laws of their fathers and follow the customs of the Greeks. This was the great forced Hellenization of King Antiochus the Epiphanes the Fourth. All right. So this is the book of 2 Maccabees chapter 6 and verse 5. The altar also was filled with profane things which the law forbidded. Yeah, because they were sacrificing pork and they were making Israelites eat that pork, you know. And you Israelites eat that thing today willingly. Even after, you know, it's one thing when you don't know any better. The Lord said at the time of our ignorance, He winked at. But it's another thing to know and to still want to eat that crap. It says, neither was it lawful for a man to keep Sabbath days or ancient feasts. Yeah, because they weren't allowed. They didn't allow that. Because there was a decree, a law that was passed throughout the realm of the Greeks, of Antiochus Epiphanes, that you cannot eat, you cannot keep your high holy days, you cannot keep your Sabbath days, you cannot circumcise your children, you can't do anything that the Heavenly Father's law allowed you to do. You had to do according to the will of the Greeks. That's why it was called Hellenization. It says, or to profess himself at all to be a Jew. So if you couldn't call yourself a Jew, you couldn't call yourself an Israelite, what did you have to call yourself? You had to call yourself a Greek, because it was the Greek, the Hellenization of the Greeks was them pushing their Greek customs upon the people. This is why the Apostle Paul said this. I'm not sure if that's Galatians or Ephesians. Let me see, just bear with me 1 second. All right, Romans 10 and 12. For there is no difference between the Jew and the Greek, for the same Lord over all is rich unto all that call upon him. So why did it say there's no difference between the Jew and the Greek? Because they're both Israelites. It's just one was calling himself a Greek, the other one was calling himself a Jew, an Israelite. Now, you had three kinds of Israelites back then. You had the Israelites that knew that they were Israelites, that were keeping the customs, the law, statutes, commandments. They were keeping the high holy days, the Sabbaths. They were circumcising their children. You know, they were doing all the things that pertain to the laws and the things that pertain to Israel. They were following. Even though they were going off, they were following the customs of their fathers. You know, they were holding the traditions of men in higher regards than the laws of Yahweh B'Shem Yahweh Shai. Then you had those Israelites that knew that they were Israelites, but that spoke the Greek tongue. They were doing all the same things that the Jews in Jerusalem were doing, but they were speaking the Greek tongue. So they would be known as the Hellenistas. The Hellenistas were Greek-speaking Jews. They were keeping the custom. That's why you've seen the Israelites coming to Jerusalem, because it was commanded that 3 times a year every male is supposed to show up, you know, in Israel. You know, the Passover, the Feast of First Fruits, and the Feast of Tabernacles. Acts 2 and 5, it says, and there were, and this devil vocab tried to spin this to try to say, so this is talking about all the nations around the world. They were being called. No, this is specifically speaking about Israelites, Jews, and they were dwelling at Jerusalem, Jews, devout men out of every nation under heaven. Why? Because they were scattered among these nations. But these particular Israelites knew that they were Israelites, but they were speaking different languages. of these other nations. This is why Pontius Pilate, when he wrote the plaque, Yahushua of Nazareth, King of the Jews, he wrote it in Hebrew, in Greek, and in Latin, because those were the three predominant languages that Israelites were speaking that were most famous at that time. But you had Israelites speaking different languages also. And this is what the great miracle here was, because when the Holy Spirit fell upon the 12 disciples, which were apostles at this time, it said that when the Spirit came upon them, they had cloven tongues of fire that came upon each one of them. So the cloven tongue is like a forked tongue, because they, in this case, the Lord allowed them to speak different languages. You know, and that was a great miracle, because that is a sign. The scriptures speak about speaking in tongues is a sign, not for those that believe, but for those that believe not. And they were like amazed and fell back like, wow, aren't these men speaking Galileans? Don't they speak the Hebrew tongue? How are we hearing them in our language that we were born in? But they were Israelites that were speaking those languages, but they were still keeping the law, statutes, and commandments of Israel. And you still had those Jews in Jerusalem that was a little standoffish with them. That's why there was a problem at the tables. And this is why the Apostle Peter had to set up men that were honorable men, that were faithful men, that were not going to be partial. You know, that they were going to treat both equal. You know, they were going to shell out to those that were calling themselves Jews, and to those that were calling themselves Hellenistas, which were Israelites that were speaking the Greek language. You know, but this, you had Israelites coming from India, you had Israelites coming from different parts of Europe, you had Israelites coming from what's known today as Turkey, Asia Minor back then. You know, they were coming from Rome, they were coming from Greece, they were coming from all different walks of life. They were coming from Africa, they were coming from Alexandria, Egypt, they were coming from Cyrene, because you had big communities of Israelites in all of those areas. And then 3 times a year they will come to Jerusalem, and that's why there was hardly no room there in Jerusalem, because there were so many Israelites there that the places were filled up. See, I guess we got some damn scoffer, huh? Always got some clown. You always got some clown that gotta say something. Yeah, I didn't catch that, but hey, the water, brother, for getting rid of him, Elder Monaghan. First of all, to Gary Collins, I don't know who you are. You look like an Edomite, if that's your picture. That was under the Mosaic law. Those don't exist after the ransom sacrifice. There is a new covenant now. Yeah, and what does that new covenant consist of? I'll wait. What does that new covenant consist of? What are the specifications of that new covenant? Since you're saying the Mosaic laws are done away with, what are the specifications? What is included in that second covenant? And like I said, I'll wait. So these are Israelites speaking the different languages that were scattered among these nations, but they were still keeping the law, statutes, and commandments. You know, and they were being looked down upon, but they were more accepted than the Israelites that did not know that they were Israelites. The ones that were calling themselves Greeks. That's why I said there's no difference between the Jew and the Greek, because they're both Israelites. It's just one is speaking Hebrew, the other one's speaking Greek. One is keeping the law, statutes, commandments, they got a beard, the other ones are not. And this is why, if the Mosaic laws are done away with, why did the apostles, when confronted with the question on circumcision, why did they give those Israelite foreigners a list of things to do, not based off of what they came up with on their own, but based off of the laws that go back to the Bible, which they call the Mosaic laws, which are the Heavenly Father's law, which he gave to Moses to give to Israel? Why did they prescribe to them in the letter to keep certain laws of the Bible. If the quote unquote Mosaic law was done away with by the sacrifice of the Messiah, Yahushua. That's the second one. All right. Now, what else do we have? Let's see. We read that. We pretty much covered most of the precepts I have here. I may have to do another lesson because we're almost at the hour mark. I may have to do another lesson with this. And then, another question she asked is, why, if the Gentiles were Jews, did they call them two different things? Well, we just explained that in this lesson. Because you had the ones that knew that they were Israelites and the ones that did not know they were Israelites. Then she asked about, what about the Ethiopian that was saved? He was an Israelite. Let's go real quick and we'll end it on this. Let's go to the book of Isaiah, the 11th chapter. Which, the Elder Karatazaba, he addressed it in his lesson. I just wanted, wanted to jump on in there and say a few words. This is Isaiah chapter 11, verse 10. And the group, the young brothers, of the Sakari, they addressed it. But she wasn't trying to hear it. Isaiah 11 and 10. And in that day, there shall be a root of Jesse. Jesse is the father of King David. And that root is dealing with Yahushua ultimately, which is Yahushua, which shall stand for an ensign of the people. Yeah, because it's Yahushua. He came down the line. You had David, you had King David, you had King Solomon, all the way down the line to who? To Yahushua, which King Solomon, if you could receive it, is Yahushua. It says, which shall stand for an ensign of the people, and to which shall the Gentiles, or these Israelite foreigners, seek, and his rest shall be glorious. Why? Because the Lord said that we would be scattered abroad among all these different nations. And the Lord will have to gather back his elect from the four winds of heaven. Matter of fact, before we read any more, let's get one more. The book of Amos. Amos chapter 9. Another key precept. 9 and 9. It says, for lo, I will command, and I will sift the house of Israel from among all nations. Like as corn is sifted in the sieve, yet shall not the least grain fall upon the earth. Because the Lord is going to gather all of Israel, because all of Israel will be saved. It's just in this time he's only looking for the elect. So going back to Isaiah 11 and 11, and it shall come to pass in that day that the Lord shall set his hand again the second time to recover. When you're recovering something, it's something that escaped from you. If you have a stall and you have a bunch of horses in it, and the door is open and a bunch of horses run out, and you go back and you're looking for those horses, when you find them, you recovered them. So the Lord is recovering his people that he spread among all these different nations for disobeying his laws, statutes, and commandments. And that's what the ministry or the gospel of reconciliation is. It says, and it shall come to pass in that day that the Lord shall set his hand again the second time to recover the remnant, the remainers of his people, which shall be left from where? From Assyria, and from Egypt, and from Pathros, and from Cush. Who are Cushites? So-called Ethiopians. Because you have Israelites that were scattered among the so-called Ethiopians. That's what the Ethiopian eunuch was all about. And what was the Ethiopian eunuch doing? Why was he there? Why did Philip run into him? What was he doing there? The Ethiopian eunuch was going back from, one of those high holy days, whether it was the Passover or the Feast of First Fruits or the Feast of Tabernacles. And he was sitting there, chilling, reading, and the Spirit told Philip to go near to him. And after Philip, broke it down to him and asked him if he understood what he read, and broke it down to him, explained to him that was dealing with Yahushua, he asked to be baptized. And then he baptized him, and then the Spirit took Philip away. And that's what that was about, because that Ethiopian eunuch, which was an Israelite, he was a part of the elect to be sealed. And at that moment, he was sealed by the word, by Yahushua, the Messiah. So it says, let me read that again. And it shall come to pass in that day that the Lord shall set his hand again the second time to recover the remnant of his people, which shall be left from Assyria, and from Egypt, and from Pathros, and from Cush, and from Elam, and from Shinar, and from Hamath, and from the islands of the sea. Because the Lord scattered us all throughout the four corners of the earth. And this is why you had the apostles, going out ministering and going to these different regions, bringing back those Israelite foreigners, especially the Apostle Paul. Because Peter and the other apostles, they were there to really teach the circumcision, the ones that knew that they were Israelites. The Lord chose the Apostle Paul to go to the uncircumcised, to the Israelites that were scattered among these heathens, because he understood the language, he understood the customs, he was involved in the gladiatorial events. He knew about the different sports back then. He knew about the history. So he was the best suited man to go and speak to them. That's why when he spoke to them, he addressed them. He spoke to them about boxing. He spoke to them about running a race. He spoke to them about relay races. He spoke to them about what was it? There was another one. He spoke to them about the poets. You see, he spoke to them about the poets, and breaking all of that down, he knew, because why? He was involved in those events, as far as watching them and observing them, and the Spirit allowed him to use that to be able to tie it in with the scriptures, to gain those that understood that, to paint the picture of what this was about, because they didn't understand, going back to the law, and when the prophet said this and the prophet said that. So he used those things, like he said, I became all things to all men, so that he can use it as an example and then eventually tie it back into the scriptures. Okay, this is what this is talking about. Boom, boom, this, that, and the other. See? So he was the best suited to go and teach them. All right? So let me read one more verse. It says, and he shall set up an ensign for the nations, and shall assemble the outcasts of Israel. Why? Because we were scattered abroad, and gather together the dispersed, or the diaspora of Judah, from the four corners of the earth, because we were scattered throughout the four corners of the earth. And that's what the mystery of the Gentiles is all about, is the Heavenly Father gathering back the 12 tribes of Israel that were scattered. Matter of fact, let me leave you with this last precept in the book of James. James chapter 1 and verse 1. James, a servant of the Most High and of the Lord Yahushua, to the 12 tribes which are scattered abroad, greeting. Because the 12 tribes are scattered abroad. They were dispersed, a dispersion. And there's many different other scriptures that we could go to. There's many scriptures dealing with the Israelite foreigners that we can go into to break down the Israelite foreigner issue. And the devil, being the devil, they're not going to accept it. They're going to keep pushing against it. They're going to keep kicking against it, but that's all right. Do what you got to do, because we're going to do what the Lord has us to do, and eventually the truth is going to come out. It's out already, but the Lord said, then shall be known who are my chosen. It's going to come to the point where the Lord is going to justify his servants, and the Lord is going to condemn the wicked, like individuals like Vocab Malone and any of you Israelites that join yourself with him. All right, so with that, I pray that you brothers have been edified, you few sisters. To the next time I say, Shalom.